Welcome everybody. Alright, so in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a sword. A sword kind of like a Roman sword or an ancient Greek sword. Now I get a lot of requests for to do stuff like this, and if you're not into game development, this will be a fun little tutorial on how to do how to just simply model something in Blender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a new file. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to hop and I'm going to scale this right down. Okay, and what that means, just by pushing S, we're just going to scale this right down. Now, the one thing that you'll notice about if you're using something for, let's say, accessories like clothes or hats, they generally have to be much smaller than you'd think. And the reason is that a character might be fairly big, but in this case we're just going to simply make it smaller here. Okay, so we can see that here. Now we can also scale this along the z-axis, and we'll make this really really small, and then scale it again along the z-axis. Now you could in theory make something like this here, but I'm actually going to push 7, which on the numpad, which what that does is it sets it up to the top view here, and I'm going to scale this along the y-axis, and there we go. Now you can still, but using the right mouse button is to simply do that here. Now I'm also going to do something a little bit weird. Let's hop back into here. Let's scale this along the x-axis. But what we're going to do is we're going to scale it, and by pushing X, we're going to scale it something more like this. And you're going to see why we're going to do this here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a mirror modifier. Now, what I'll do is I'll add in the mirror here, and you can see that it does nothing at this point in time. However, if we kind of move this here, and of course we push some of these buttons here, specifically the x-axis, and we just kind of move this in here, you can see here that it is kind of merges just like that here. Now this is going to be important just simply because this is how we're going to make the sword here. And it makes a little bit more sense to do it this way. Now you don't technically have to do it this way. However, this is something I wanted to try to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Loop Cut here under the tools, and I'm just going to move it something more like that, and I'm going to loop cut again. Now again, like with anything in life, there is more ways to do. There's lots of ways to do the same thing. So I'm just going to simply add that in here, and what we can do is we can hop into face here, and what actually, if we go ahead and extrude, you can see that we can move this up more and more like that here. Now, there's a few things you'll notice. This sword looks more like a medieval sword versus a ancient sword. And if we go ahead and we go to Edge Select and we right click, we can actually move this out a little more like that here. Okay, and if we really wanted to, we could take the bottom 3 layers here, just like that, and then move it out as well. Okay, if we wanted to do that. So we can kind of just move it something more like this. And that actually looks kind of cool. Now, of course, we'd have to take this and move it out too. Okay. Now remember, we can always scale this and do a whole bunch of other things with this here. For the most part, swords in the ancient era were actually not that big. They were actually more into spears, believe it or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back into face select and simply just move it down. More like that. Yeah, there we go. I think that's probably a good length. Even then, that's a bit too long. But if you push, let's say, 1 on the numpad, you can see that here. And that's probably it. Now I'm going to go a little bit shorter because you're going to see what I'm going to do in a second here. Alright, I'm just going to hop up to the top by pushing 7. And this looks a little bit weird, but let's hop into vertice mode here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select these 2 vertices, and I'm going to push 1 again, kind of maneuver around, and I'm going to create a nice little point. That actually looks kind of cool. Another thing we can do is let's actually go to the loop cut, and we're going to cut along here this time. Okay. Now another thing I should point out is that whenever we do a tutorial here at Mammoth Interactive. We always like to make sure that you can kind of functionally use it. And if you're into game development, you'll notice that that you tend to have a lot less vertices, meaning that you generally want to make it not detailed as possible. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this down a bit. All right, and by a bit, I just mean just a bit here. And you can see here that that is actually kind of a cool way of making, it's kind of a cool way of adding in some detail to the top here without adding too many vertices. Again, we can take this and move it out just a bit. And you can see it is cutting off a bit, but don't worry about that. All right, and there we go. That is a neat way of actually kind of making it a little bit more more intense. All right, so this is part one. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.